Hello everyone, and welcome to my master's thesis presentation. Since the beginnings of the 20th century, a huge explosion of musical genres happened, creating and innovating what we know today as jazz, pop, funk, and many more. With these new styles came new techniques, of course, both for the classical guitar, but especially for its relatives, such as the electric guitar, which quickly gained notoriety and today is arguably the better known of the two, generally speaking. With its really cool techniques such as bending, tapping, and the variety of harmonics, it's undeniable and ironic at the same time that the electric guitar became an influence for the classical one. The aim of my thesis is to encourage you and me, aspiring guitarists, to try out possibly new techniques and to compose and write our own exercises based on the various techniques that will be mentioned. Also, this work is heavily focused on techniques applied to classical guitar. Each subchapter has its own set of exercises, which I've constructed based on various difficulties. Bear in mind that even though this thesis is finished, we never really know all that there is to know, because all the time new and crazy techniques are thought out. So it's still work in progress. Let's begin. My work has three main chapters, each focused on one important aspect of the modern technique. The first chapter refers to the picking hand. As you can see, I've mentioned both right hand for right-handed guitarists and left for the lefties. The reason for that is I've made a rule for myself to never let lefties out of the equation, because I'm one of them. And we oftentimes tend to get really confused about which specific hand an author is referencing. Anyway, as Abel Carlevoro and Scott Tennant wrote in their famous guitar methods, one of the most important aspects which can make you a better guitar player is the economy of movements, both in left and right hand, because it helps physically and psychologically when you're playing really long and demanding pieces. The key to playing well and fast is also the efficiency of the movements and the relaxed but steady state, or should I say ready state, of the fingers. In essence, the main thing we must remember is less movement but with maximum results. With that being said, I'll briefly pass by every technique so you can get an idea and maybe some insights about them. Slap and pop are effects which we very well know today, especially because of funk and disco music. We oftentimes link these two with the bass guitar. Early jazz bands have used the slap technique on the double bass, where it was considered a more vigorous approach to the pizzicato. It can be executed using the knuckle of the thumb on the bass guitar, or using the side of the hand or the index finger on the double bass. On the classical guitar, we can hear the slap and pop in various pieces, but perhaps the best known example is Libra Sonatine Fuoco by Roland Dyens. One of the exercises for these techniques goes like this. Next up, the palm mute is mainly viewed as a pizzicato effect on the classical guitar, with examples such as La Muerte del Ángel by Astor Piazzolla or Bagatelle No. 3 by William Walton. But its origin points actually date back to well before the 1960s, on both electric and classical guitar, on which it is more known as palm mute. The effect was used in various styles of music, including reggae, like Hold Me Tight by Johnny Nash, early pop and rock, like Wheels by Billy Vaughn, and even much later in the 80s by thrash metal bands like Slayer, Anthrax, Metallica, and Megadeth, which used a more aggressive version of palm muting. Here's an example of a minor harmonic scale from one of the exercises using palm mute. The next technique is more of an experimental one by nature. Scraping is an effect most commonly used in rap rock, rap metal, but its roots are in the 60s from bands such as Pink Floyd, Balloon Farm, and even Led Zeppelin. Scraping can be executed with both a pick and the nail of a finger. The height of the created sound is based on the speed of execution. An example of such an effect can be heard in the guitar solo from Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine. Coming next is thumb picking. For us classical guitarists, it's not unusual at all to pluck every string with a specific finger or distinct finger. However, acoustic guitar players like Lindsey Buckingham and Tommy Emanuel have elevated the polyphony between the melody and bass in such songs as Big Love and Classical Gas. Here are two exercises for thumb picking in my thesis, one using a walking bass pattern and the other one a more country approach. The last technique, or should I say branch of techniques for the right hand, are artificial harmonics. Since before the classical period of music, in France, Mondonville, a composer by the name of l'Abbé Le Fils wrote a menuet for violin entirely with natural and artificial harmonics. These are effects which create a high-pitched version of a note by taking advantage of a well-known physical principle known as the natural resonance of a sound. The natural flageolets or harmonics can be performed easily by gently touching an open string in certain places and then plucking, wherein the artificial ones need to be created in the same way, but also while holding down a specific note on the fretboard. Initially, flageolets were considered by classical critics as a novel effect, but with very limited usage. Mozart's father, Leopold, described the perpetual use of flageolets as a really laughable kind of music, owing to the dissimilarity of tone. In any case, starting with the 18th century, harmonics became a proper technique, a proper playing technique, as an integral part of some of the most well-known classical guitar pieces, such as the Carnival of Venice by Francisco Tárrega, and less known pieces such as the Fifth Fantasy by Fernando Sor. Later on, in the 19th and 20th century, other famous pieces like Variations on a Theme by Sor by Miguel Lobé, the Guitar Concerto by Heitor Villa-Lobos, Tango in Sky by Roland Dyens, and even Piazzolla with his Campero incorporated flageolets very often. Here is an exercise combining artificial and natural harmonics with open strings and normal plucking. Chapter 2 includes the legato as the main technique, and bending and tapping as the other two which branch off from it. Legato in music means playing fluidly, either by maintaining notes while playing other ones, or by creating slurs between sounds so that they don't have breaks in between. You all know this stuff. What many classical guitarists don't know is the 3 notes per string system, which is heavily used on the electric guitar. It utilizes, as you may have guessed, 3 notes per string for playing fast scales on the fretboard using ascending slurs or hammer-ons and descending slurs or pull-offs. Here is an example of a minor harmonic scale using the 3 notes per string system. Bending and tapping are techniques derived from the legato. A bend changes the pitch of a sound, and the tap helps both with sustaining a note and with fast playing. These are heavily used in famous songs and solos such as Sultans of Swing or Eruption. Bends are pretty new compared to other techniques and can be executed both upwards and downwards, although the most comfortable way of playing them varies depending on the chosen string. The key to performing an accurate bend is feeling the exact pressure needed for a note to sound precisely a semitone or tone higher. On the classical guitar, because of the relatively high string tension and height, it's very difficult to bend a note higher than a semitone. For example, in Dyens' Libra Sonatine Fuoco. Either way, here's a fun little exercise using bends with the third and fourth finger. Tapping, on the other hand, has been around since the times of Paganini, who was one of the pioneers of this technique. The execution implied tapping the strings with the bow while simultaneously plucking them with the left hand, pizzicato style. Today, guitar players use one hand or both for executing taps, and classical pieces include them with examples such as Lobet variations on Soar or the more recent A Night in Tunisia. Here's a neat little example for practicing tapping. The last chapter talks a bit about the origins of percussion on the guitar and about the various percussive effects we can create nowadays on it. Initially, guitar percussion was a way of expressing passionate beats in flamenco music by making use of a technique called golpe, or hit. The flamenco guitar was also more suited for an aggressive style of playing because of the protective plastic on top. Also, because of its low string height, the flamenco guitar allows faster legato playing with characteristic buzzing sounds being produced. I've divided the percussion section in simple and complex percussion. The simple percussion is based on the two most important elements, the bass or kick drum and the snare drum. Such effects are widely used in Astor Piazzolla pieces for guitar duo such as Tango 1. The complex percussion adds the hi-hat and the toms in the equation, thus creating a wider palette of timbre. Modern guitar players like John Gaume and Tommy Emanuel make full use of the nearly infinite sound spectrum of percussive effects in songs like Passion Flower and Mombasa. Lastly, here is an exercise combining both types of percussion on the guitar. In conclusion, the 20th and 21st century are times of change and innovation, a time for us to broaden our minds and accept all types of music, techniques, families of instruments. It is a time of diversity and non-judgmental attitude towards new and exciting discoveries. The best guitar players today are people who escaped their comfort zones and learned a lot about various aspects of music. So I encourage each and every one of you to try out new things, new songs, new techniques, and to never be afraid of creating music and art, because that's what we most need today. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I wish you all the best and feel free to leave any comments you like. I will respond to each and every one of them. See you later.